Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we explore a variety of books. Let's get started. Okay, today we're diving into air safety investigators, using science to save lives, one crash at a time, by Alan E. Diehl.
Yeah, this one's fascinating. It's not just, a list of accidents. It's Dr. Deal's own story.
Exactly. A former NTSB, FAA, USAF investigator. We're basically following his career chronologically, looking at how safety evolved, the lessons learned, often the hard way.
Mm-hmm. And the book's dedication really sets the stage, doesn't it? Naming victims, ending with that quote, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you angry."
It really does.
Yeah.
Hinted controversy, maybe. Resistance to finding that truth.
I think so. And Captain John Nance, in the foreword, calls Diehl an unsung hero, someone who really pushed on the human factors side of things.
Pushed against the grain, it sounds like. Advocating for things like CRM, crew resource management.
Exactly, which is huge now, but wasn't always accepted. So yeah, let's walk through it chronologically like the book does. Starts early on, right, with some design issues.
Right, the DC-10 comes up early. The Turkish Airlines Flight 981 crashed in 74.
Uh-huh. The cargo door failure. And the really worrying part, Douglas Aircraft, the manufacturer, and the FAA, they kind of knew about a similar issue.
They knew from another flight. American Airlines Flight 96.
That's the one, yeah. Happened a couple of years before. But the fix wasn't, well, effective enough, obviously. It shows how knowing isn't always enough if action isn't taken.
A critical point right there.
Hmm.
And then the American Flight 191 engine separation in 78 is mentioned too.
Yeah, also highlighting these early vulnerabilities in design or maintenance oversight.
So that sets a context. Then comes the Airline Deregulation Act in 1978. That shook things up, right?
Oh, definitely. Big changes. And people like John Nance were worried. They thought, okay, more competition, maybe pressure on airlines, maybe straining the FAA. Could safety suffer?
That raises the question, yeah. An already overworked FAA suddenly dealing with a lot more complexity.
Exactly. It's part of the evolving landscape that Diehl was working in.
Okay, so now we get to a really pivotal moment Diehl focuses on. The United DC-8 crash in Portland, Oregon, December 78.
Yes. This one's huge for the human factors story. Diehl was the chairman for the NTSB Human Factors Group on this one.
So what happened there?
Well, the crew got completely fixated on a landing gear light, an unsafe indication.
Okay, a problem, but...
But they got so tunneled in on that they failed to keep track of their fuel. They literally ran out.
Ran out of fuel because they were focused on the gear light.
Incredible, isn't it? It just showed so starkly how human focus or lack of it could override everything else. How a relatively minor issue could lead to, well, disaster if not managed correctly.
And this is what led Diehl to push for CRM.
Directly, he drafted the first NTSB recommendation saying airlines needed crew resource management training.
Wow, that's a direct line from tragedy to a major safety innovation.
Absolutely. And CRM, it's all about communication, teamwork, making sure the first officer or flight engineer feels they can speak up to the captain. It changed everything. Global standard now.
Incredible impact from one investigation, one recommendation.
Truly.
Okay, moving forward in time, the book talks about the Sioux City DC-10 crash,
Yeah.
United Flight 232 in 1989. That story is just unbelievable.
It really is a catastrophic engine failure. Uncontained. It took out all three hydraulic systems.
All three. How do you even fly a plane with no hydraulics?
Barely. They called it coffin corner, this tiny window of control they had using just engine thrust, virtually uncontrollable.
They landed it, sort of.
They did, crash landed it. Captain Al Haynes and the crew, they used their training, they used CRM principles, they worked together under impossible pressure, saved a lot of lives.
And didn't a passenger help another pilot?
Yeah, Captain Denny Fitch. He was an off-duty DC-10 instructor, happened to be on board. He helped manage the throttles. Just an amazing example of teamwork.
The controller helping them divert to Sioux City, too. Just, wow. What a contract to Portland.
Exactly. It shows CRM working in the most extreme way possible, how that coordination can make the difference.
So after these major U.S. investigations, Diehl's work goes international. The African presidential crash.
Right, yeah. This is referenced in a State Department memo. He investigates the crash of President Samora Machel of Mozambique's plane. A Soviet Tu-134 crashed in South Africa.
Unusual circumstances, the book says.
Very. For one, they had extra black boxes, a modern digital one, an old foil one, even a maintenance recorder, lots of data.
Okay.
And a weird detail. The cabin lights went out instantly on impact. Turns out there was an acceleration detector specifically designed to do that in a crash.
Huh. What about the human side?
Complex, very experienced Soviet crew. But the air traffic controller in Mozambique, a trainee, apparently failed his English exam, which was meant to be the language used.
Oh, that's a red flag right there. Communication breakdown potential.
Big time. Then you have the navigator making this inexplicable turn towards mountains. The captain's reaction. The Soviets insisting a fake radio beacon lured them off course.
And political stuff, too. South Africa involved.
Yeah. Initially involved, yeah, then later admitted paramilitary activity nearby. Very murky, politically sensitive. And again, Diehl noted the lack of CRM training for the Soviet crew as a possible factor.
Shows how universal these principles are, or should be. Okay, so then he shifts focus a bit. Moves to Cessna.
Yeah, he goes to work for Cessna, focusing on human factors in design, specifically the Citation business jet.
So getting safety baked in earlier.
Exactly. Advocating for things like vertical engine instruments, easier to read at a glance, getting rid of confusing overhead switches, bigger windows for better visibility.
Makes sense. Proactive stuff.
And also pushing for crashworthiness in general aviation. Shoulder harnesses, crash padding. Influenced by Ralph Nader's work, actually.
Right, Nader was big on auto safety. Makes sense the ideas would cross over.
Diehl even had his own forced landing in a small plane, an Aranca. Probably reinforced his feelings on survivability.
I bet. A personal perspective. But before Cessna and the big CRM breakthroughs, his early NTSB days weren't always smooth sailing.
No, he mentions investigating the Leonard Skinner crash.
Oh, wow, that one.
Yeah, and he was frustrated. The investigator in charge apparently wasn't that interested in the human performance side of things, just wanted the basics.
Shows that resistance he faced early on.
Definitely. But he did get to dig into pilot error more in other crashes, like the National Airlines 727 crash in Pensacola in 1978.
The one that went into Escambia Bay.
That's it. 3 passengers drowned after surviving the impact. He chaired the human factors group there, looked at how sensitive the 727 throttles were, pilot altimeter readings, controlled flight into terrain, basically.
And the Las Vegas crash. A smaller plane.
Piper Navajo Chieftain, 1978 again, crashed right after takeoff. Weight and balance was a huge issue there. Overweight, center of gravity way too far back.
Dangerous combination.
Plus a subtle visual illusion involving the elevator trim tab that the pilot might have missed on pre-flight, and he noted how weak the seats were back then, legally.
Just piling on the factors. The book also touches on Eastern Flight 66 at JFK in 75. The thunderstorm one.
A 727 again. Crashed on approach. This really brought the danger of downbursts, severe wind shear into focus. It wasn't fully understood then.
And the survival aspect was notable there, too.
Yeah, the flight engineer survived, but the pilots didn't. Just shows how unpredictable crash forces are. And again, seats came up. 3 passengers survived the impact but died in the fire. They were in strong rear-facing seats because it was an ex-military plane. Raised questions about airliner seat standards.
Lots of recurring themes emerging. Which brings us back to Portland, Flight 173. Diehl revisits it.
He does, yeah. To really hammer home the CRM failures, the fixation on the gear light, ignoring the fuel warnings from the other crew members.
The first and second officers were saying something.
They were concerned, yeah. But maybe not assertive enough, and the captain just seemed oblivious. Classic breakdown of crew management.
Tragic. And he connects this to other famous incidents.
Right. The Eastern L-1011 in the Everglades, Tenerife, all had these flight deck management issues at their core. Even an earlier United 737 crash in Chicago in 72, poor crew coordination. It wasn't just Portland, it was a pattern.
So the need for CRM was clear, even if the resistance was there.
Exactly. And Portland was the catalyst for Diehl's formal recommendation that finally started the ball rolling.
Okay, then there's a really deep dive into the Down East Airlines crash. Maine, 1979, DHC-6 Otter.
Yeah, this was a long, complex investigation, and it allowed Diehl to really document problems beyond just the cockpit. Management pressure, chronic pilot fatigue, poor training, and weak FAA oversight, a whole system failing.
How did he uncover all that?
He got help from a Maine aeronautics inspector, Phil Simpson, who knew the airline had issues. It painted a picture of pilots being pushed too hard.
Like the captain, Jim Merriman.
Right. The book says Merriman felt trapped, started documenting illegal stuff the airline was doing, and the first officer was pretty inexperienced for the tough flying conditions up there.
And aircraft issues, too.
Potentially, yeah. Maybe a bad altimeter, weird engine noises they'd reported. A lot going on.
And still resistance at the NTSB to the human factors angle.
Some traditionalists were skeptical, yeah. But then there was a public hearing. A former Down East captain testified about the unsafe practices. That really blew it open.
So it's kind of a perfect storm. Commuter safety concerns, obvious crew errors linked to bigger problems, and Diehl documenting it all.
Pretty much, and it led to significant findings and, importantly, got Diehl recruited by the FAA to work specifically on human performance programs.
Okay, so he's now at the FAA. Then comes Air Florida Flight 90, Washington, D.C., 1982, the Potomac crash.
A really tragic one. Boeing 737, taking off in snow, crashed right into the 14th Street Bridge.
What went wrong there? The book points to complacency.
It seems like it. The crew joking about the snow and ice on the wings, noticing weird engine readings but pressing on. Alarming, really.
What were the engine readings?
EPR, engine pressure ratio. They were reading high but falsely high. The pressure probes iced up, so they thought they had enough power, but they didn't.
The instruments lied to them because of the ice.
Exactly. And Diehl explains how even a little ice on a 737's leading edge really messes with lift. They didn't accelerate right, but didn't abort, didn't firewall the throttles when they needed to.
Was there a reason they might have hesitated with the throttles?
Possibly. Diehl mentions this little note in the manual about voiding the engine warranty if you exceed EPR limits. Could that have subconsciously held them back? We don't know, but it's a possibility.
Wow. And other factors. Pilot experience, FAA oversight.
Yeah, the captain had limited time in the 737, some past training issues noted. And Diehl points to ongoing concerns about FAA oversight consistency. He actually pushed hard for CRM inside the FAA after another crash later involving an unqualified pilot.
So he kept advocating. And he was developing ADM too, aeronautical decision-making.
Right, specifically for general aviation pilots, trying to teach better judgment.
Did it work?
Studies showed it did. Embry-Riddle students, Canadian flight schools, they saw big drops in pilot judgment errors with the training.
So success. FAA embraced it.
Well, not entirely. He faced serious resistance internally. There's a quote about one senior FAA official saying he'd never believe in judgment training or CRM.
Never, despite the evidence. That's disheartening.
It really is. Shows the bureaucratic hurdles. And it gets worse.
How so?
He and a colleague blew the whistle. They told Congress senior FAA officials were misleading them about the safety of infant car seats on planes.
They blew the whistle on their own agency.
Yes. And the FAA's response, according to the book, they allegedly diverted sky marshals to investigate them.
What? That's credible retaliation.
Seems like it. And that whole situation, the resistance, the potential retaliation, partly led him to leave the FAA. He moved to the Air Force in 1987.
To the Air Force Inspection and Safety Center. A different environment, but still focused on safety.
Exactly. And the military had its own serious safety problems. Huge losses of aircraft and people in accidents, sometimes more than in combat, like the B-29s and WWII.
But was the military more open to things like CRM?
Not necessarily. Still resistance, especially in certain communities, like fighter pilots. Diehl points to a B-52 crash in '94 and a C-17 crash in 2010. Similar circumstances, pilots known for risky flying. A cultural issue.
He even tells a story about a general doing risky maneuvers.
Yeah, and a C-135 transport. Scared the co-pilot and passengers, just illustrates the challenge. Plus, basic ergonomic issues in planes like the T-37 trainer were still being ignored.
So similar battles, different setting. He also got involved with ACS.
Or carrier analysis system, yeah. Set up after the Aero air crash in Gander, Newfoundland, 1985.
The one with the U.S. troops returning home?
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
A DC-8, 256 lives lost. Probable causes were ice snow on the wings, maybe low thrust, possibly overweight, similarities to other icing crashes.
Just awful. And he kept pushing CRM in the military.
He did, which brings us to another really difficult event, the Black Hawk shoot-down in 1994.
Over Iraq. U.S. F-15 shooting down U.S. Army helicopters.
Yes, a terrible case of fratricide. Diehl presents it as a direct result of failures in CRM and situational awareness.
How did it happen?
The F-15 pilots misidentified the Black Hawks. They expected enemy aircraft, maybe didn't register the different shape or color, expectancy illusion. And the AYCS controllers didn't realize what was happening until too late.
Just a catastrophic breakdown.
Completely. Afterwards, Colonel John Nansen Diehl actually briefed Tactical Air Command officers on CRM, including, apparently, a very skeptical Top Gun commander.
Still hitting that resistance, especially in the fighter community.
Seems so. The book even suggests there might have been efforts to sideline Diehl because he was pushing these ideas so hard after the shootdown.
Wow. And there was another crash mentioned. A CT-43.
Yeah, a modified 737 used by the Air Force. Crashed in former Yugoslavia in '95. Navigational error. Highlighted issues with inadequate nav aids and maps in some parts of the world. Still a risk.
So even with all his work, Diehl felt preventable accidents kept happening in the military.
He reflects on that, yeah. The high rate continued after he left. He mentions the huge number of GI deaths and accidents, the cost. He even uses the private Jessica Lynch convoy incident in Iraq as an example where CRM, subordinates questioning a leader's plan might have helped.
It shows the broad applicability.
He even offered to testify for the pilots in the Green Ramp C-130 crash in '94 to explain how CRM might have prevented it.
Always connecting it back. Okay, the book's final chapters turn to a very public tragedy. John F. Kennedy Jr.'s crash in 1999.
Right. Diehl analyzes this as a classic case of poor aeronautical decision-making, or ADM, the very thing he helped develop training for.
What were the key factors he points out?
Kennedy's limited experience, especially solo in that complex Piper-Saratoga, no instrument rating, flying at night over water in iffy weather, apparently not using the autopilot, and maybe get their anitis, that pressure to complete the flight.
All things covered in ADM training.
Exactly the kinds of things. Poor judgment, hazardous attitudes. Diehl suggests the tragedy might have been averted if Kennedy had had and used that training. He even brings up the I'm safe checklist for self-assessment illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, emotion eating. Kennedy seemed compromised on several of those.
A really tragic case study. So how does Diehl wrap it all up?
He introduces his safety triangle idea. It connects accident generation, accident investigation, and accident prevention.
Okay, how does that work?
It's about a systems approach. You have to understand how accidents happen, the underlying causes, not just the final event. Then you investigate thoroughly, and based on that, you implement effective prevention.
And prevention has different types.
3 main ones he outlines. Eliminate the hazard completely if possible. If not, control the risk. And if you can't fully control it, provide clear warnings.
Can you give examples?
Sure. Eliminating hazards like stricter air traffic control after the Grand Canyon mid-air collision. Controlling risk mandatory ground proximity warning systems, GPWS, after the TWA Dole's crash. Providing warnings like the traffic alert and collision avoidance system, TCAS, after the Cerritos mid-air collision.
Got it. Systems that help pilots avoid danger.
Exactly. And he reiterates the success of CRM and ADM, plus the value of proactive things like the Anonymous Aviation Safety Reporting System, ASRS, safety audits, safety management systems, SMS.
So it's an ongoing process, always needing that systems view.
Especially now with more traffic, new technology, and still challenges in areas like medevac helicopters and general aviation. He even mentions that controlled Boeing 720 crash tests the FAA and NASA did.
To test fuel, right, anti-misting kerosene.
Yeah, but they learned a ton about cabin crash worthiness too, even though the fuel test didn't quite go as planned. Serendipitous findings.
So Diehl reflects on successes but also missed opportunities, the bureaucratic fights.
Yeah, and the crucial role of whistleblowers. It's a powerful summing up of a career spent trying to make flying safer, often against the odds.
This deep dive really shows the sheer effort and, frankly, courage it took to get air travel to the level of safety we see today. It wasn't automatic.
Not at all. It's constant learning, constant questioning, constant pushing for change, like Diehl did. You see how one incident connects to another, how human factors became central?
Right, from design flaws to pilot decisions to company culture, it's all linked. The safety triangle idea really helps frame that, understanding, investigating, preventing.
It's a cycle. And Diehl's own struggles, resistance, the whistleblowing, it's a sobering reminder that progress often relies on individuals willing to stick their necks out for safety.
So for you, the learner listening to this, hopefully it gives you a much richer sense of just how complex aviation safety is, all the layers behind every single safe flight you take.
Yeah, maybe you'll look at accident reports a bit differently now, understanding there's usually more to it than just pilot error. It's about the whole system and the constant work to improve it.
Definitely. So here's a final thought to maybe mull over. Think about that safety triangle generation, investigation, prevention. How could you apply that framework to other areas? Maybe your workplace, another high-risk industry, even just managing risks in your own life.
That's interesting. How are problems generated? How do we analyze them when they happen? And what can we do proactively to stop them? The lessons from aviation really can apply elsewhere.
Absolutely. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge, spread the word.